Hook ill-15s. You got the raise, you got the promotion, maybe you even doubled your income in the last few years, and somehow you feel broke. Not broke the way you were at 22, but broke in a way that's harder to explain. A quiet, gnawing kind of broke. The kind where you're technically fine, but it never actually feels fine. Tension 1560s. Here's the uncomfortable part. You're not imagining it. You're not bad with money, and you're not alone. There's a psychological mechanism so deeply wired into how humans respond to money that it quietly swallows every raise, every bonus, every new income milestone you hit. And almost nobody talks about it honestly, because admitting it out loud would mean admitting that the thing you've been chasing might never actually arrive. We're going to talk about that today, not in a way that makes you feel guilty, in a way that finally makes the math of your life make sense. Body. Let's go back to the beginning. Not your beginning. The beginning of this idea. In 1949, a sociologist named James Duesenberry published a study on American household spending behavior. What he found was strange. It wasn't just that people spent more when they earned more. It's that they spent proportionally more, almost automatically, as if income and expenditure were magnetically linked. He called it the relative income hypothesis, the idea that we don't measure our standard of living against some fixed baseline. We measure it against the people around us, against what we had last year, against what we now believe we deserve. And the second your income goes up, the baseline goes up with it. This is lifestyle inflation, and it's not a character flaw. It's a cognitive feature. Here's what nobody tells you, though. Lifestyle inflation doesn't feel like inflation when it's happening. It feels like living appropriately. It feels like finally being able to afford what you always should have had. The nicer apartment doesn't feel like a luxury. It feels like the obvious next step. The weekend trips don't feel like excess. They feel like what people at your income level just do. That's the trap. It's invisible from the inside. Let me give you a concrete picture of how this plays out. Imagine someone making $60,000 a year, tight budget, careful with every purchase. They get a new job. Now they're making $90,000. That's a 50% income increase, significant, life-changing on paper. Within 18 months, they have the same amount in savings, sometimes less. What happened? The apartment upgraded because 90,000 earners don't live where 60,000 earners live. The car upgraded because the commute is longer and they deserve something reliable. The wardrobe upgraded because the new job has a different dress code. The restaurants upgraded because the friend group shifted. The vacations upgraded because now they can finally afford to travel properly. Every single one of those decisions felt rational, earned, normal, and the savings gap from 60,000, it followed them to 90. Now here's the psychology that makes this even more unsettling. Researchers at Princeton, including Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, spent years studying the relationship between income and emotional well-being. And what they found became one of the most cited and most misunderstood statistics in personal finance. They found that emotional well-being, the day-to-day feeling of happiness and ease, stopped significantly improving around a certain income threshold. In 2010, that number was $75,000. Adjusted for 2026 inflation, it's closer to $110,000 to $120,000. But here's what people always miss about that study. It wasn't saying that more money doesn't matter. It was saying that above a certain point, more money stops buying more daily peace. What it buys instead is a more expensive version of the same anxiety. And that is the part that breaks people, because they did everything right. They studied, they networked, they ground through years of underpaying jobs to get to the salary they believed would change things. And it did change things, just not the things they thought it would. The stress didn't go away, it just upgraded too. Now let's talk about something even more specific to right now. to 2026. Because lifestyle inflation isn't new, but the version of it happening today has a particular cruelty to it that previous generations didn't face in quite the same way. Social media created a visibility layer around wealth that has never existed before in human history. In 1985, you compared your lifestyle to your neighborhood, your co-workers, maybe your extended family. Your reference group was maybe 100 people. Today, your reference group is everyone. Curated, filtered, algorithmically selected to show you the most aspirational version of every life adjacent to yours. You're not comparing yourself to your neighbor's Honda. You're comparing yourself to the influencer's Tesla, the LinkedIn exec's Maldives trip, the TikTok couple's kitchen renovation. And your brain doesn't register these as unattainable outliers. It registers them as the norm, as what people like you are doing. Psychologists call this social comparison theory. Leon Festinger described it in 1954. But the digital amplification of it in 2026 is something he couldn't have imagined. We are now running an ancient psychological program, the need to assess our status through others, on a stimulus load that the brain was never built to process. And what does that do? It permanently shifts your aspirational baseline upward. Before you've even had a chance to enjoy the raise you just got, the algorithm has already shown you the next lifestyle tier you should be reaching for. This is why people making $200,000 a year describe feeling middle class. This is why a six-figure household income in a major city in 2026 often feels like barely enough. Not because the math is wrong, but because the psychological goalposts have been privatized and outsourced to platforms that profit from your perpetual sense of scarcity. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you suddenly couldn't see what anyone else was spending, what anyone else was earning, what anyone else's home or car or vacation looked like, would you still want what you're currently working yourself to the bone to afford? I'll let that sit for a second. Climax. Here is the central insight that I think changes how you see this whole thing. Lifestyle inflation isn't fundamentally about spending too much. It's about identity drift. Every income increase comes with a new social script. A new set of behaviors, aesthetics, spending habits, and social environments that signal to yourself and others that you have arrived at this new level. And the painful part isn't the spending. It's that the identity shift feels mandatory. It feels like who you now are, not what you now buy. When you downgrade the apartment, you're not just losing square footage. You feel like you're losing a version of yourself you worked hard to become. When you skip the business class upgrade, you're not just saving money. You feel like you're being demoted back to a version of yourself you were trying to leave behind. This is why lifestyle deflation, the intentional scaling back of expenses after an income increase, is psychologically one of the hardest things humans do with money. It triggers the same emotional pain pathways as social rejection. Literally. The neuroscience shows this. You're not weak for finding it hard. You're human. But understanding that the pain is identity-based, not logic-based, is the first thing that gives you any real leverage over it. Ending. So what do you do with this? Not a list. Not 5 steps. Just one honest observation. The people who seem most at peace with money, not the richest people, the most at peace people, they all share something unusual. They made a deliberate decision about what lifestyle tier they actually needed, not the one their income could justify, not the one their social group modeled, the one that actually felt like enough. Enough is not a number, it's a decision. And in a world designed to convince you that enough is always one income bracket above wherever you currently are. Making that decision quietly, privately, on your own terms. That might be the most radical financial act available to you right now. If this hit somewhere real, share it with someone who needed to hear it. They probably won't tell you they did, but they'll know.